Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just wait for the gallery to stop. I want to take a moment first to thank the many public servants in the Department of Finance and across government who have worked hard over the past weeks and months to develop the budget. For the past 2 years, our province, along with every other jurisdiction in the world, has had to grapple with the COVID-19 pandemic. It has had a profound impact on daily life, how we interact with our families, friends, and the world around us. The pandemic has laid bare a range of issues, many systemic in nature, that have held back our province and its residents for years. We've seen the challenges in maintaining acceptable standards of care for our most vulnerable in long-term care. We've seen how our economy buckles when access to childcare is threatened. We've seen just how inadequate and ill-equipped our social safety nets are, even in the best of times. And we've seen how lower-income islanders, women, and racialized islanders continue to disproportionately experience the worst of what our society has to offer. And while the pandemic has taken and continues to take so much from islanders, the pandemic also gave us an opportunity to reflect on how we have structured and operated our society. There was cautious optimism in the air, Mr. Speaker. Maybe the pandemic has finally awoken government to see these persistent issues. There was hope. But hope is a delicate currency, and there are few things more crushing in politics than having your hope betrayed. As we enter our third year of the pandemic, there is a growing sense of dread that the window for systemic change has closed. And whether that's because government simply does not care about meaningfully addressing systemic issues, or whether it simply doesn't understand them in the first place. It is perhaps not a surprise that a Conservative government would be unable to articulate, let alone deliver, the necessary and transformational solutions to the major issues facing this province. After all, as a political philosophy, Conservatism is the champion of the status quo when it isn't trying to take us back in time. Islanders cannot afford to go back in time, Mr. Speaker. The status quo has not worked and is not working for so many islanders. And just as it's inappropriate to call our COVID plan moving on, government should not be presenting a moving backwards budget. The annual operating budget is an opportunity for government to announce its new programs and services which signal its priorities. At least it usually is. Unfortunately, this Conservative government is more about telling stories than implementing change. The thing with storytelling is that it's spectacle, not the substance, that matters. The same cannot be said about public policy. Remember shovels in the ground day one for a new mental health hospital? It was a promise that sounded nice, but it neglected that the original timelines were set for a reason. We needed to ensure that healthcare staff are available and other community supports are in place. It's 1,038 days and counting since day one. Remember midwifery? The former Minister of Health announced midwifery services for islanders back in 2019. It's now 3 years later, and this government is, for the third time, announcing midwifery services. A woman could have created a new life and got it into school before we actually see midwifery services going. Is this also what we can expect for the promise to roll out medical neighbourhoods? Even when they do manage to follow through on an announcement, it's usually way behind schedule, incomplete, or a complete mess when it's rolled out. How about the low-income dental program originally proposed by the official opposition, something fairly simple and backed up with the research, expertise, and data that was announced multiple times and was launched before the civil servants even had the information to take applications and before government had even bothered to talk to the dentists themselves? If these Conservatives have displayed anything, it's that they can't even properly roll out relatively straightforward programs, Mr. Speaker. I wonder then how they will manage something complex, like creating an entirely new clean tech sector that can compete with the much higher wages available in the rest of Canada and the US. We already have serious issues staffing other sectors like construction and healthcare. We need clear details on how this government will staff this new sector, or it will remain a pipe dream too. There are some good measures in this budget, Mr. Speaker, don't get me wrong, but they are not ambitious. Certainly not when you consider the extraordinary times we are in. And when you factor in this government's poor record of implementation, a number of the promises in here will never come to fruition. This is not a bold plan to meet the moment we are in. We need a budget and a government that is brave enough to aim higher. This government's priority is paving roads, hiring their friends, and protecting the privileged. Where are the priorities for islanders? During the last few months, the official opposition has held several community forums, and we asked islanders that question. We made space for their stories, their worries, and their dreams. What you hear from us on the floor of this legislature is what we heard from them. This government has the same opportunity to learn and do better. Why then does it continually choose to be timid instead of brave, safe instead of bold, predictable instead of creative? This government has continued the tradition of pre-budget consultations that amount to little more than asking community stakeholders to send their hard work and well-thought-out ideas off into the void, never to be seen again. Very little seems to come from them, and there's certainly no accountability. We have no idea what those ideas are or what happens to them. So what did we hear, Mr. Speaker? What did we hear from families and individuals? We heard that the rising cost of living has been hitting island families hard. In fact, last year, PEI saw the largest increase to the cost of living of any Canadian province. This is not the kind of leading the country that we want to be doing. We are excited to see free school supplies for grades kindergarten to 9 funded in this budget. It is long past time, Mr. Speaker. It is long past time that all children have the same basic necessary supplies they need to have the same start without that cost being downloaded to families. And I thank this government for that motion. But let's be clear. Let's be clear, this won't help with so many of the other expenses that families and individuals struggle with day to day. Every family I know on PEI has been shocked by the prices they see at the grocery store. A grocery run that used to cost a family $100 is now doubled. Parents want to feed their kids healthy meals all the time, but it's becoming almost impossible. Families need a society that pays a livable wage to all workers so they can care for their children. Families now feel like they are falling behind, wages are not keeping up with growth here on PEI, and a basket of boutique promises are not going to make enough of a difference. One of the biggest things government could do for families is to put more money in their pockets. In this budget, we'll see another raise to the basic personal exemption, which will give people about $70 a year. Not that helpful, Mr. Speaker. But we have a missed opportunity here. It looks like government is going to keep all the revenue from the carbon levy, instead of returning it to people as rebate checks, as is done under the federal model.
I hope not.
This would have given hundreds of dollars back to households, making a real difference for islanders in the money that they have in their pockets. There is still time to change. And I am hopeful that the policy will change, Mr. Speaker, but I'm not full of hope at this point. It's great to see further investment in kids' sport to increase opportunities for youth to participate in sport. But what about the kids who participate in dance, music, arts? Why do we pick and choose which programs are worth funding to support well-being and which ones aren't? It sends the wrong message to kids and families who choose different ways to participate and express themselves, and to youth with accessibility challenges. And in these troubling times, we need to be inclusive of all. Inclusivity is not just a catchphrase. You actually have to implement it in your policy, Mr. Speaker. Childcare is critical to our social and economic well-being. The pandemic has taught us that if we ignore childcare, we will all suffer the consequences. PEI was one of the first to sign the childcare agreement with the federal government, which again is a great achievement, and it will benefit all island families through the provision of affordable childcare and support islanders in participating more fully in their economy. However, as we have heard over the past few years, the challenge lies in hiring, training, paying and retaining early childhood educators. If we are going to meet the current and growing demand for early childhood education with our current and growing population, we must see real steps towards that federal investment and the associated accountability here in PEI. Mr. Speaker, we've also heard what island priorities are for health in this province, and Mr. Speaker, that was a long conversation. We have heard from people across the province about how worried they are about healthcare. They want a primary healthcare provider who knows them, who cares about them, who will be an advocate and a champion for their health. Right now, we have over 20,000 islanders without a primary healthcare provider. That's 1 in 10. Islanders want to be proactive about their health and get the support and the care that keeps them healthy and out of the hospital. They want to be able to age in place in their homes and communities with healthcare support available close to home. Islanders want those who care for them when they and their loved ones are sick, nurses and frontline staff to be valued, treated with respect and retained. This government has done the exact opposite, Mr. Speaker, and their words of thanks to our healthcare workers have rung hollow. This government has not invested in nurses in any meaningful way. They have not consulted with or talked to nurses on our front lines during perhaps the most challenging 2 years of their entire career. They have avoided championing nursing education initiatives that the opposition has proposed, even though we are meant to be in a spirit of collaboration. And now they're surprised that our healthcare system is understaffed and can't seem to fill the shifts. Islanders want to be confident that if they need surgery, if they are in chronic and extreme pain, that they will get the help that they need when they need it. But again, because this government has not invested or valued the staff that provide these surgeries, we still see wait times measured in years. Islanders also, Mr. Speaker, want supports for their loved ones with mental health and addiction. Islanders who struggle are valuable and worthy of our support. There is no hope for a mental health hospital during this government's mandate. That dream is long gone. But what other investments have been made to address this? Wait times for care are still inappropriately long, and the mobile mental health unit, while finally operational, is only one tool and something Islanders needed long before it finally got off the ground. And the big news story that this government came up with was to throw $3 million at a pet project for mental well-being that no one asked for. Islanders cried out for frontline help, for crisis help, and they got another layer of bureaucracy instead.
Wow.
Islanders want their loved ones and themselves to have a safe and caring place to go when they get older. They want to stay home as long as possible, but when they do, they need a little extra help. And they want that long-term care system that is loving, caring, enjoyable. This government has accepted that basic care is good enough. After 2 years where we saw just how vulnerable seniors are in this province, I am shocked that this government does not have the will for real transformational change when it comes to our seniors. It is not acceptable that 70% of deaths from COVID happened in private long-term care homes. I just don't believe that our elders needing to be safe, needing to be physically cared for, should not be a priority above all else. I believe our elders deserve. Our elders deserve to live their life to the fullest. It is encouraging to hear the Finance Minister say government will be launching a long-term care review in the coming weeks. Great. But the former Minister of Health announced that same review almost 2 years ago, so forgive me if I don't hold my breath. We need to stop bumping this down the road. We need to stop accepting the bare minimum and start striving for a reality where our elders enjoy their days, and this budget has none of that. It is also nice to see government finally acknowledge the lack of services for women and gender-diverse islanders, especially in the area of pelvic floor health, something this side of the House has been speaking about loud and clear. Encouraging as well to hear government will continue its programme to provide menstrual products in the school system, another ask from the official opposition. We hope the Minister will keep her word and ensure all schools have access to these products now. As much as government may want the pandemic over, we cannot wish our way out. If government wants us to live with COVID, it also has to be honest about the fact that COVID will continue to disrupt our lives. New variants may appear and cause harm to our communities and the most vulnerable among us, and there is the risk of long COVID. While government is proposing a $15 million contingency fund to address COVID in the long term, I seriously question whether that is enough to support islanders and businesses who will struggle through future outbreaks. What is government doing to support island workers who will lose income by doing what's best for their community, by isolating to protect others from infection? What will government do to support businesses that may have to reduce capacity or shut down due to future COVID outbreaks? These are questions that we need the details on, Mr. Speaker. They matter to our community. We've also heard what islanders' priorities are for the environment, water, land and climate action. I was glad to see last week the Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Action finally release his plan to decarbonise the province. The plan isn't perfect, no plan ever is, but it provides a decent foundation to set our province on the right course. Implementing that plan, however, will take massive investment from government, both immediate and sustained for decades to come. And we'll need even more to help us adapt to the climate changes that are already inevitable, to recover from those changes, to repair the damage. The investment in this budget is nowhere near adequate to reflect the urgency of climate change, Mr. Speaker. It does not signal a government that takes the future of our province seriously and puts its money where its mouth is. The Net Zero plan does identify one key action, and it's one that we've heard loud and clear from islanders tip to tip. Province-wide land use planning focused on creating sustainable communities is one of the most impactful long-term tools we have in fighting not only climate change, but also a whole host of other issues, from protecting farmland to accessing services to individual and community well-being. Proper land use planning in our province is about 50 years overdue, and from this budget it looks like we'll probably have to keep waiting, and our grandchildren will pay that price. Change won't just happen. Government needs to believe in it, invest in it, and I doubt the small increase included in this budget is going to cut it. This government, like many before it, is choosing to perpetuate development that creates communities and regions that are increasingly disconnected, uncoordinated, car-dependent, unwalkable, and ultimately less sustainable. Yet we are encouraged to see the Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Action engage in their portfolio in more measurable, meaningful ways. This engagement will hopefully help produce action, direction and investment in key areas of climate action. We appreciate this, and as we already see, that same level of engagement by other ministers of the government is noticeably absent, and islanders are paying the price. We've also heard what islanders' priorities are for housing and social services. Mr. Speaker, our government exists to serve islanders, and islanders want more than anything else to be treated with dignity and respect by government when accessing services. When the department responsible for delivery of services to our most vulnerable populations, seniors, children, low-income islanders, people with disabilities, does not have a mandate of client-centred service, it means the experience of the client is not dignified. Government after government has consistently underfunded social services, underfunded housing, underfunded the vital non-profit organisations who do the work that government is unwilling or unable to do. I see little to no change in that approach in this budget. While it is a welcome announcement, will reducing the tax they pay really have enough of an impact to meaningfully improve the capacity of these organisations we need? As the Green Caucus has recognised for some time, poverty is a policy choice. The The decisions and indecisions of government perpetuate systems and services that can actually keep people in the most difficult of circumstances with little to no means of escape. Rearranging existing programs, adding more dollars onto the allowances that are given to those who need them, creating new rules and eligibility criteria for new programs, new barriers. None of these marginal actions address systemic issues. It's rearranging the deck chairs on the deck of the Titanic, Mr. Speaker. These programs have never worked, and they never will. They just keep those systems working and keep the recipients insecure and on the edge of dignity. And to be clear, in PEI, 1 in 5 children live at or below the poverty line.
That's awful.
If we as a province truly want to meaningfully address poverty and all of the huge challenges it brings in health, education and our economy, we have to stop doing what has never worked.
Oh my gosh, yes.
We need to be prepared to stop delivering social support services in a paternalistic, we know best, conditional system that is designed only to keep people in their place. Prince Edward Island has the unique opportunity to be the boldest jurisdiction in Canada by implementing a basic income guarantee and truly modernising the way we deliver social services. This government is choosing to stick with the old broken system rather than invest in something new and transformative that would set us up for the future, not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the easy thing to do. Mr. Speaker, when we put people first, we have no difficulty or hesitation to state unequivocally that housing is a human right. When we accept this truth and apply it to how we approach the housing crisis in PEI, we will realise that this is not a business problem. This is a legitimate human need and right, and it's not enough to state, just say it. We must also take all possible steps to ensure that right is realised for all islanders. We're seeing the continued investment in rent supplements. While I have no doubt that this assistance will support tenants who are struggling to afford the cost of housing, I have to point out, again, that the amount of money that we spend to fund these supplements is approaching or equal to the amount of funding we're investing to actually build new housing, and rent supplements do not create new housing. We are in, again, still a housing crisis, and in light of the new vacancy data released just yesterday, moving in the wrong direction, street counts that suggest drastic increases in homelessness, and our future plans for ongoing population growth, I am very concerned that government is not doing everything it can to guarantee housing now and into the future. As if we needed any more indication that this budget does not represent a transformational vision of our province, we need not look further than the lack of any reference to fund the promised Citizens' Assembly. Last sitting, this Legislative Assembly voted in favour of a motion urging government to establish a Citizens' Assembly composed of 27 islanders from across the province to prepare and propose a model of proportional representation that could achieve the support of a majority of islanders. Proportional representation provides an opportunity to improve our politics for the better. It could give us a Legislative Assembly that is more reflective of the public we represent. It is an electoral system that would foster genuine, not illusory collaboration and lead to better policy making. Despite government's acknowledgement in their very first throne speech that the illuminating recent debate over our democratic future revealed a desire to approach our democracy with an open and judicious mind, our caucus and the public are both disappointed that government appears to be approaching our democracy with a completely closed one. Mr. Speaker, the overall message from this budget is, if things weren't working for you before, they will not start working for you now. It is time for us to reconsider the foundation from which we develop policy, programs and supports. For far too long, we've approached the budget only as a financial position. While we must be careful how we spend public dollars government has been entrusted with, we must also remember that those dollars are provided by islanders for government to do the collective heavy lifting that islanders cannot do on their own. It is therefore government's responsibility to provide for and safeguard our collective health and well-being for all people, for all islanders. It is time for us to apply a people-first lens in all of our policy. We simply cannot afford to ignore the endemic problems islanders are facing on a day-to-day basis. The cost is far too high, Mr. Speaker. There are many opportunities that government could seize to improve the lives of islanders. The window, though, for transformational change is rapidly closing. Islanders expect their government to do better, and it is time to step up. Mr. Speaker, even in the face of unimaginable challenges, islanders have been and will always be resilient. I want to recognise their efforts throughout these difficult 2 years, especially as government shifts from leading a collective effort into one of downloading responsibility and risk to individuals. We can and should have hope that things will be better. On behalf of the official opposition, I am grateful that there are programmes and services in place that address some of the immediate and pressing challenges islanders are facing, including many that have been championed from this side of the House. But we need a government that is brave enough to aim higher. I am urging this government to broaden its focus, to see a bigger picture that includes all islanders, and to work across all departments and programmes to strive for real, meaningful and systemic change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.